is written.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk a little bit about the Hispanic community as it pertains to Tulsa, Oklahoma. First, I'd like to address my personal segregation story. Born and raised in Brownsville, Texas, which I think you would know that in the early 50s and 60s was a segregated community. But our segregation was a little bit different. In Brownsville, Texas, in the 50s and 60s, we bussed white kids out of Hispanic neighborhoods and put them all in white elementary schools and white junior highs. And it just so happened that these schools were often newer, or at least more renovated. The teachers were more sought after, and they weren't hindered by slowing the pace of education by a child that didn't understand English. So when I talk about segregation, and I related, I think when you say segregation, I hear neighborhood schools. Please know that that's not disrespect to anybody that went through the struggle, because I know that there was a struggle. And I had a little bit of struggle, and my educational deficiencies could probably be related to the fact that we were not in a separate but equal school. So I want to talk a little bit about Tulsa, because Tulsa is in a very unique situation. And I sometimes assume that everybody knows how unique Tulsa is, but we're talking about how in the 60s and 70s and 80s, the Hispanic population in Tulsa was insignificant. In fact, I arrived in 1995. It was a corporate relocation. I'd started off as an agent in Leavenworth, Kansas, retired after 20 years in the military. And so I got a Tulsa Chamber demographic study. Disappointed to read that only 2% of the population was Hispanic. Oh, boo-hoo. So when we moved here, there was no Mexican bakeries, there was no place to buy tortillas. There was one or two terrible restaurants. But 2% Hispanic was about what they reported. The other thing I thought was very unique to Tulsa was the fact that there was no borders. Of course, the numbers supported that, but there really weren't. I mean, there were some areas in North Tulsa, North Lewis, that kind of had been adopted. I think a lot of it had to do with the price of the housing and not necessarily the fact that to that. But as I've seen the evolution of the population, I've seen in my own customers gifts where maybe they bought their very first home in North Tulsa, and after they renovated that, and as they attained more success, they bought a second home, their second house, and moved to East Tulsa. And now I'm seeing them on their third generation of homes, and some are in South Tulsa, but guess what? Most of them are in Owasso and Collinsville. So the shift, the demographic shift, is very interesting. In 1998, I started seeing a shifting or an arrival of the Hispanic population. Kind of an amusing story. I was with my then wife. We were at Woodland Hills Mall, and I noticed a sing-song conversation somebody was having. And I told my wife, I said, "Boy, that's Mexican Spanish. Why would a Mexican tourist come to Tulsa, Oklahoma?" And all of a sudden I opened my eyes, I started seeing more and more, and I realized that we were in the midst of an arrival of a Hispanic population. In fact, in the 2000 census, I think we went up to almost 8%, Tulsa County. And as that community started arriving, of course, the empresarios, the Hispanic business owners, started establishing businesses. My good friend Pancho Anaya began his first bakery in that time frame. Antonio Perez relocated his grocery stores from California to Tulsa. Maria de Leon launched radio station KTXD as the first Hispanic-owned radio station. And so we started the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce out of necessity, because a lot of these business owners didn't understand how we need to do business in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And now the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is in the 15th year of service to that community. Setback occurred in the mid-2000s, about 2005, when the convicted criminal State Representative Randy Terrell and his criminal cohorts persuaded the legislature to pass a bunch of anti-immigrant legislation. And that hurt the community, and it hurt the economy. It hurt the community, but the community survived. You know, the community's always going to survive. Some moved out, some just stayed in their neighborhoods and didn't travel much. But it hurt the economy of Oklahoma in a very significant way. But by late 2000, the Hispanic community, developed a way to work with the leadership in the legislature, in the House and the Senate, so that we were able to avoid any further anti-immigrant legislation. And the community has prospered since then. We heard about the census reports. We talked about 2010 census, 11.6, I say 12%. But I think one thing that we need to clarify as we talk about that community and the numbers is that those numbers do not include the undocumented population, because they're not able to get registered. And I would say our best guess is that there's probably 75,000 undocumented people living in Tulsa County, 75,000. So I think you have to think about, recognize that 75,000 figure, what the impact of an immigration reform would be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It would be a tremendous boost to the economy. Talking about two ups and two downs, I think the first down, not intentional, but it's the reality of fact that this community developed overnight, and we didn't have the infrastructure for it. And I remember having conversations with Bill LaFortune about that issue. We talked about it. He said, what's the biggest problem? The biggest problem is we don't have an infrastructure. Not only in the physical sense, in terms of homes and streets, but in the educational sense. Tulsa Public School District was not ready to accept that number of people. And we still aren't. We're still not there. And I think that challenge with an immigrant community is that they don't understand how we educate in America. Many of them have not been through the educational process in Mexico. So they come here, they parent children, not fully understanding that they are very vital to the educational process. Second set of downs. I've seen a lot of initiatives. You know, the great thing about Tulsa, Oklahoma is that we're a compassionate community. I mean, look at the Operation Peter Pan when we absorbed a bunch of Cuban kids. Look at the Vietnamese refugee challenge where you all took a bunch of people that you didn't know into your homes and let them live with you and help them until they got jobs. And now the Vietnamese community is a prospering community. Their sons and daughters are doctors and lawyers and pharmacists. You know, Tulsa has done very, very well in these communities. But now, we're dealing the same way with the Hispanic community. I think there's a lot of help out there. I mean, I look at the Kaiser Foundation and the help that George Kaiser has given. Not only that, more important, I think, is giving us a blueprint for what we need to do education. Kaiser's challenge or mission was have academic success. So let our kids have academic success. How do you do that? He's concluded that we have to do it starting preschool. We have to do that in pre-kindergarten. Hispanic kids were arriving to kindergarten not knowing how to read because the Hispanic parents didn't know that they had a role to play to teach their kids how to read. Educare does that now. And we're seeing the success of that. And I think long term, the fact that our Hispanic kids are starting out reading and knowing numbers, knowing shapes and colors is going to help the community in the long term. It's going to increase the number of high school graduates. It's going to increase the number of college graduates. Another program that's started to see some success is an OSU program called Juntos. It seeks to get in and teach the Hispanic mothers to educate their children. encourages them to let the kid go at least half day to preschool. Because the Hispanic mother doesn't want to give up that child. They're stay-at-home parents, and they don't want to give up that child. We're saying, give them up for half a day. Let the kid go to a school and let them learn English, let them learn how to read, let them learn math. So those kids, we hope, that are involved in this program called Juntos will result in these kids going into kindergarten better prepared than they were before. The problem is that all these programs are stovepiped. So they have success, but that success is not being coordinated with Dr. Ballard and his people who are trying to do these same things and address these same issues. And so the down is we don't have an adult supervisor that can supervise all these efforts that are well-intentioned efforts that we Tulsans are paying good money to accomplish. But the efforts need to be coordinated and need to have an objective. And that objective, I think, at least for Tulsa, has to be whatever Dr. Ballard's programs need to be. And we all need to be in sync with the goal of getting kids graduated and into college. I think an up in this community is that if we can get the parents engaged, Hispanic parents are very motivated to see their kids do better. We're very family-oriented. We want to see our kids succeed, and we'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. Challenge is because, again, immigrant parents who weren't involved with school, maybe in their home country, certainly aren't involved with school in the United States, don't know what to do. Child comes home from school. Son, mijo, did you have homework? Do you have homework? I said, oh, no, I already did it at home. I already did it at school, Mom. Well, in my home, and when I was growing up, my mom would check my book bag. And she'd say, well, what's this? I said, oh, that's homework. Well, you better do it. These parents would want to do that, but they don't know to do that. And we need to figure out a way how to teach them to do that. They want to help with homework, but they don't know English. So we have to figure out a way to help parents learn English. They want to help with math homework, but they don't know how to do math. So maybe we have to figure out a way to do the homework in a different way. Maybe we need to use something like Khan Academy to help the parents teach their kids the things, the reinforcement that they need to become part of that three-legged stool. Now, I get it that when we start diverting money to parental education, teaching them how to speak English and all, diverts money from the classroom, and I'm very sensitive to that. But I think until we involve parents, our educational efforts are going to be disjointed. They have to be on the same sheet. They have to recognize that they are that third leg in the three-legged stool. So for us, segregated schools are not that big a deal. But schools that can get parents engaged, that's a big deal. So if we can figure out a way to develop outreach programs, to develop programs within the Tulsa public school system to teach parents to get involved, teach parents English, teach parents how to help with homework, I think that we will see great results very quickly. Dr. Ballard and I have talked several times. We talked about getting more bilingual educators. Well, everything we saw, we had more bilingual educators. And it's true, it would be. But we're not going to get more bilingual educators. It's a very competitive resource. Everybody wants bilingual educators. But we can certainly workshop our way through bicultural and teaching our teachers to become more sensitive, more bicultural, so that they know how they need to work with a Hispanic parent when they have a Hispanic child educational issue. That's, I think, attainable. So when we discuss the resegregation of Tulsa, again, I'm not bothered by that term. I'm not bothered because fundamentally, I'm looking to attain educational excellence, maybe not social restructuring. I believe that education is the great equalizer. I've lived through 60 years of attempts at integration. I'm sorry, but I don't see a difference. I don't see any improvement. I'm sorry. But I think if we were to, I think when we went to integrated schools, it cost us neighborhood schools. And so where parents used to walk to the school to check on their kids, we're not doing that anymore because the kids are somewhere, I don't know where. So, and not to talk about the expensive busing and the misuse and these diversion of these resources. If I say, let's not worry about the resegregation of Tulsa. Let's get our neighborhoods back. Let's get the parents back to help us. I think we need to teach our parents to stay engaged in their kids' educations. I think we need to mentor parents, have good parents mentor parents that don't know what their role is to help our kids. And I think that the end result, if we can do these things, is we will have lower dropout rates. We will have graduation rates. We will have more people to go to college in all neighborhoods. Because I'm not talking about just the east side of Tulsa, I'm talking about all of Tulsa. I appreciate this opportunity. I thank you for listening.
It's Dr. Jocelyn Lee Penn. Hands here. Next up, sorry about that, is Dr. Jocelyn Lee Payne of the John Hope Franklin Center for Reconciliation.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Are there teachers in the room? If you're a teacher, raise your hand. I just want to say thank you. Without you, we have no hope, in my humble opinion. I want to say thank you too for the Dan Allen Center for for hosting this event, and particularly for inviting me to be on this panel. I am totally intimidated, and I want to share that with you. I have no data. I have no data. I have a story, and it's mostly my story, but it relates to the theme of tonight's presentation. And before this is all over, I'm going to invite you to a place where you can tell your stories, so wait for it. Before I start, though, I think it's important to make a disclaimer. It probably becomes clear as I give you my remarks, and I did write them down because I can ramble. I've not taught in public schools. I've never been a teacher. I've never played one on TV. But like most of you, I have an opinion about public school because I attended. And most of us believe, as we think about school, most of us think about schools we attended. When I taught future teachers, one of the first things that we did in my classes was for everybody to close their eyes and think for a minute about a cool moment in a classroom. And then I asked them to open their eyes and talk about the classroom. I didn't really care about the cool moment. I wanted them to realize that when we talk about schools we attended. And I am a very proud product of Tulsa Public Schools. I attended Dunbar Elementary, and Miss Judy Jones was my kindergarten teacher. And I went to Bunch Elementary for the 1st through 6th grade, and in an unnamed teacher's room, I learned how to write upside down and backwards so that I could get outside for recess. And only later in life did I realize that that was actually a space manipulation process. I have very little spatial ability to manipulate space now, but I learned that, and I learned how to do that because I wanted to go outside. And that teacher made me think that all I was doing was getting to go outside. And it's one of the few ways that I know how to really change things around because of that. At Marian Anderson Junior High School, in 7th grade, I won the Tulsa City County Spelling Bee with help from Helena Freeman, the school librarian. And I graduated from Booker T. Washington High School and received a scholarship to be part of the President's Leadership class at the University of Oklahoma, which then was a 4-year scholarship. I didn't know that a lot of people thought I had an inferior education. I didn't know that. People at Holland Hall almost tried to teach that to me because during our senior year in high school, a few of us were invited to take the admission test for Holland Hall. I'm an Episcopalian, have been since birth. And we were told that they were considering the possibility of maybe admitting black students to attend Holland Hall that year. So they had several of us go out and take the test, and when we got home, I remember my mother asked me, was it hard? And I said, I don't think so. Didn't seem that hard to me. But there was really never in my parents' mind a question. I was going to Booker T. Washington High School. It didn't really matter what that test had said, but I mean, somebody had to go, so they sent us. We got a letter back that said, oh, too bad. It was really nice of you all to come, but unfortunately, you're not able to meet our admission criteria. Now, I may have made part of this up, but I don't think I did. My mom's gone, so I can't ask her. But I think that there was at least a suggestion in the letter, or somehow she got wind of the idea, that they had determined that our IQs, the IQs of the group that took the test, were not high enough to be among their student population. Well, my parents got the letter and said, oh, never mind, you weren't going anyway, forget it. Moved on. I was traumatized because I began to wonder, okay, if they've said that, what's in store for me? The people that I revered, the people that I thought I was following, in addition to some of my relatives who all had gone to college, the people that I thought, I'm going to go be like them, had all gone off. They'd gone off to school. They'd gone to graduate school. They were doing amazing things. I thought, well, surely, I thought I was going to be like them. And for a while, I was a little bit traumatized. My first year at OU, I felt better about the whole thing. I made really good grades from my inferior, not up to par education. And I knew that I was going to be okay when I graduated with honors from a very small, very private, very academically rigorous college. I could probably be okay with this. When we began to talk about resegregation of schools, I did some reading. I read a lot, so I did some reading in preparation for this evening. I just didn't gather data. What I realized is that at the time that we were talking about that desegregating schools was a big issue, a lot of the focus was on the resources. The expectation was that if schools were desegregated, all schools would fare better. And particularly, black schools would fare better. Before I came over here, I was sitting down with some friends, including a person that I went to school with pretty much throughout school. And we were talking, and she raised the point, yeah, remember when we were in that group that they said needed to take this special class? And we went to where they told us to go, because you didn't have choices then. We went to where they told us to go, and they handed us the textbooks for this special class that we were taking. That was the first time it had ever been offered anywhere, we were told, and we were the pilot project. And when we opened the textbooks had been marked through. They had belonged to several other schools before they belonged to us. So either the plan was to teach this class a bunch of other places, and that plan was abandoned, Or we were not the first. I don't know. We took the class. We pursued that. But as an example of what was to change with school desegregation, schools weren't supposed to have that happen. That was routine. Schools were not supposed to have that happen. We were going to get resources in our schools too. And no one was going to assume that because you went to a specific school, you, for some reason, didn't have the goods. No one was going to know that they had been part of a decision-making process that left some schools in worse shape than other schools. So in the end, we desegregated schools, we did all this stuff with the data, and I really appreciated the things that David and Laura were saying, and Ed as well. We did all these things with how we were moving people around and what kind of trends we had and all of that, and schools still looked like the neighborhoods in which they were situated. And I want to offer another thought. I want to offer a thought about the possibility that in any given neighborhood, the school should be the beacon. The school facility should be the best thing that kids get to see. When kids go to school, they get a sense of who they are. I mean, we send them there for a lot of their waking time. So that you go to a school that you know is not quite polished, it's not quite edgy, it's not quite right, the projector doesn't quite focus, the screen doesn't quite come down all the way. The substitute teacher is a new substitute teacher and different from the last substitute teacher. And we're hoping we're going to get a permanent teacher, but someday we could maybe get a long-term sub. That's not what school desegregation was supposed to yield. School desegregation was supposed to yield a place, a situation where Anderson Elementary was as attractive as Zarrow. And no offense to anybody who lives and sends their children to Zarrow, and no offense to anybody who lives and sends their children to Anderson. But honest to goodness, I went to both schools in one day and I almost had the bends. Kids adopt what they see. They know they're important to mommy and daddy. But when they get to school, it can be a little confusing because you go to a school that's kind of rangy. You get to feeling like, well, maybe I'm not that important myself. Maybe what you get out of this deal is not that important either. And we have to change that. We have to change that. I was asked to say two good things. I had a lot I was going to tell you, but I was asked to say two good things and two bad things, but I was also asked to address specifically African American students. So this is what I want to say about African American students. African American students and all other students deserve beautiful, well-equipped schools that are staffed with knowledgeable, culturally aware, thoughtful, forward-thinking teachers who strongly believe that every child can and will learn with proper instruction. Thank you. And every teacher has to have the grit and the fortitude to deliver that instruction. And empowerment. Thank you. Thank you. I was asked to say something about opportunity and school diversity. I'm not sure if this is my editing or my misplacement of commas. About opportunity and school diversity, setbacks, obstacles, and progress in terms of school integration. I believe that we learn from the experiences we learn from. I believe that we network with people we're around, except Proximity does not breed familiarity. Being in the classroom with people who are not being kind to you, being in a classroom that is not embracing and welcoming you, being taught by a teacher who does not appreciate that you may not be the best reader in the world, but by darn, you win trophies for fancy dancing. Being with teachers who don't get that and don't understand that there's got to be a way to use your fancy dancing to teach you, that has something about that, and diversity has to be considered. Always use paper and not an iPad that times out. Just saying. And I was asked, or maybe I made up, that I was going to speak about excellence. I believe that if we dedicate ourselves to excellence for all and set a really high standard of expectation, and if we equip teachers and schools and children for success, who sits next to whom will take on a whole different relevance. Everybody would then be recognized as having something positive to share with everybody else. Last night, I went to hear Charles Mann, who was the presidential lecturer at the University of Tulsa, and I saw Deanna Harris. And I told her that I was going to steal something that she said in the Freedom's School documentary. So I'm on record publicly as saying I stole this right out of Deanna's mouth, and she was quoting her mother. I'm paraphrasing because I didn't get the full quote. When her mother learned about all of the accomplishments that were going on for Booker T. Washington High School, if I understood this correctly, her mother responded with some silence, and Deanna asked, what's wrong? I think she probably thought her mother was crying with joy, but. So her mother said, well, the thing is, I don't exactly understand why it's just Booker T. Washington High School. Why it isn't every school that's demonstrating that same level of excellence. I think Ms. Harris was right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn.